containment doors groaned as they slid open, releasing a gust of recycled air tinged with chemical sterilizer and something heavier, something musky and metallic. The creature inside the enclosure shifted, its massive frame casting a broad shadow across the reinforced observation pane. 4 inches of composite glass separated it from the line of alien veterinarians frozen in place. "Do not enter," said Drawl, a pale blue-scaled Tavari with a double-lobed head crest. He held up one trembling appendage. It destroyed the hydraulic lift with a single swipe. 2 handlers were nearly crushed. "He's sedated, right?" asked Quentin Voss, adjusting the strap on his shoulder medical bag. His voice was calm, but his eyes scanned every detail of the enclosure. "We dosed him with the maximum allowable sedative for his species," said a squat bipedal flarn named Seska. "It had no measurable effect." Quentin looked through the viewing port. The animal, if it could be called that, resembled a terrestrial bear, but only in the vaguest sense. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a barrel chest and dense fur that shimmered with a faint violet hue. Its face was broad and muscular, and its teeth were serrated like a shark's. But it was the eyes that held Quentin's attention, dark, intelligent, and wide with panic. "You're all calling it aggression," he said, pulling out a handheld scanner. "But no one's considered that he's scared out of his mind." "Scared?" Drawl's voice cracked. "He threw an armored handler through a wall." Quentin stepped forward. "That doesn't mean he's vicious. It means he's overwhelmed. He's probably in pain, confused, and surrounded by aliens poking him with things." "You do realize this is a Threxian Korr beast," Seska said. "They are apex predators on their homeworld. Nothing hunts them, and nothing tames them." "Well," Quentin said, unclipping the scanner's lens cover, "maybe it's time someone tried understanding one instead of trying to subdue it." The scanner whirred softly as he pointed it through the glass. It displayed elevated cortisol analogs, erratic pulse, and muscle tremors. The Korr beast was stressed, but not injured. Quentin tapped the comm panel. "Open the secondary gate, slowly." "Are you out of your mind?" Drawl backed up a step. "You'll be killed." "I'm a vet, not a gladiator. I'm going to help him." The secondary gate hissed and began to rise. The moment the metal clanged upward, the beast tensed. Quentin stepped into the enclosure slowly, his posture low, hands visible. "Hey there, big guy," he said softly. "You're not in trouble. Just need to figure out what's wrong." The creature let out a low rumble. Not a growl, not quite a warning, more like a whine. Its back paw shifted, revealing a raw, inflamed ankle joint hidden beneath the fur. Quentin slowly reached into his bag and produced a portable diagnostic wrap. "Looks like you've got a joint infection. That can't feel good." The beast looked at the wrap, then at him. It didn't move. "Let me help you, all right?" He took a cautious step forward, then another. The other vets on the monitor feed held their breath. Quentin knelt just outside the creature's reach and slid the wrap across the floor. The Korr beast sniffed it, then lowered its head slightly. Quentin took that as a yes. He moved closer, eyes never leaving the beast's. With gentle hands, he applied the medicated wrap to the swollen joint. The creature flinched, but didn't retaliate. "Good boy," Quentin whispered. "You're doing great." Outside, Drawl exhaled. "By the suns, he's actually doing it." After wrapping the joint, Quentin sat down cross-legged, showing he wasn't a threat. The Korr beast lowered itself, resting its massive head on its forepaws. It let out a long breath, eyes still watching him, but calmer now. Hours later, after fluid samples, a full scan, and a non-invasive treatment plan, the beast was sleeping soundly. Quentin stepped out of the enclosure, drenched in sweat. Seska approached him. "You treated a creature that shredded containment plating. How did you know it wouldn't kill you?" "I didn't," Quentin said, wiping his face with a towel. "But I knew he wasn't attacking out of hate. He was just feeling anxious." Drawl rubbed the ridges of his head. "Anxious. We thought it was rabid." Quentin shook his head. "Korr beasts are incredibly intelligent. You can't just drug them and expect them to stay calm. Their stress response is tied to their perception of safety. You have to show them they're safe." The next day, Quentin returned with a team of 2 alien techs and a portable imaging machine. The Korr beast, now nicknamed Bruk, tolerated the presence of the techs as long as Quentin stayed nearby. The scans confirmed a minor joint infection and early signs of systemic stress from confinement. As they finished, one of the techs, a long-limbed Kritar named Ival, dropped a tray of instruments. The loud clatter made Bruk jump and rear back, knocking over a steel table. Quentin moved fast, raising his hands. "Bruk, it's okay." The beast froze, eyes darting, breath rapid. "You're all right, stay with me." Quentin approached slowly, speaking in a low tone. The beast's breathing slowed. It turned its head toward him, then relaxed again. Later, in the medbay lounge, Ival approached with a cup of synth coffee. "You calmed it like a mother with a terrified child." Quentin accepted the cup with a nod. "It's not magic, it's trust. Bruk's not a monster. He's scared, hurt, and in a cage. You plan to keep treating him? As long as he needs it." Over the next week, Bruk's condition improved. Quentin administered antibiotics mixed with a nutrient slurry, using scent markers to signal safety before entering. The beast responded to tone, posture, and even simple gestures. Then came the incident. A power fluctuation knocked out containment systems across the south wing. Bruk's enclosure unlocked by accident. Emergency lights flickered, alarms blared. Security teams scrambled. Quentin sprinted down the corridor, dodging panicked staff and overturned carts. He reached the hallway intersection just in time to see Bruk charging, not toward someone, but away. The creature barreled into a wall, trying to escape the chaos. "Rue!" Quentin yelled. The beast stopped, eyes wide, its muscles bunched, ready to bolt again. "Easy. You're okay." Quentin stepped into the creature's path, arms wide. Bruk panted, eyes wild. "I'm here. You know me. You trust me." Bruk paused, then slowly lowered its head. Quentin walked up and placed a hand on its shoulder. The fur was damp with sweat. The backup systems kicked in. Lights flickered back to full power. The hallway quieted. Security officers arrived, weapons drawn. "Stand down," Quentin barked. "He's not attacking anyone." The officers hesitated. Bruk gently bumped Quentin with his snout, then lay down in the hallway. "See?" Quentin said, exhaling. "He's just feeling anxious." After that, no one questioned Quentin's methods again. But not everything stayed calm. During a routine checkup a few days later, Bruk began to limp again. Quentin examined the same joint and found unusual swelling. The infection had returned, resistant to the initial treatment. Worse, Bruk's behavior changed. He began pacing, snapping at shadows, and refusing food. Quentin ordered a full blood panel. While waiting for results, he stayed overnight in the observation room, watching the beast toss and turn, restlessly pawing at the floor. By morning, he had dark circles under his eyes and a log full of notes. Seska entered with a datapad. "The cultures came back. It's not just resistant, it's mutating. Some strain we haven't cataloged before." Quentin rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We'll need to tailor a new antibiotic, possibly combine it with immunomodulators." "You're not leaving until then, are you?" "Nope." "You look exhausted." "I'll sleep when Bruk does." Seska left with a sigh. Quentin leaned against the glass, watching the beast. "Hang in there, big guy. We're not done yet." Quentin knelt beside Bruk's flank, pressing the thermal pad gently to the beast's side while the med scanner streamed a real-time readout into his retinal overlay. The swelling had progressed. The wrap had slowed the infection's spread, but something in Bruk's immune system wasn't responding the way it should. The beast's temperature was up again, and his breathing had grown irregular, deeper, slower, as if pacing itself through pain. "You're fighting it," Quentin said under his breath, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "But something's blocking the response. It's not just the joint anymore." Bruk shifted, letting out a soft chuff. The sound was quieter than a sigh, but carried a weight that made Quentin hesitate. The creature was exhausted, not just physically, but in a way that reminded him of long-term shelter animals, those who'd been caged too long and had started to go still inside. The overhead lights flickered and a pair of elongated shadows slid across the enclosure entry. A moment later, two alien figures entered: Dr. Echoes, a cerulean-skinned Varn technician with a dozen mobile ocular nodes, and Murat, a lanky, spiraled-appendaged grell who served as the research liaison. "We've isolated a subcellular anomaly in the blood samples," Echoes said, extending a gloved limb to hand Quentin a data slate. "It's modifying as it replicates. This isn't a standard pathogen, it's parasitic." "Parasitic?" Quentin's brow furrowed. "As in, it's feeding off him?" "Not just that," Murat interjected, her voice like wind through reeds. "It's influencing organ function. There's a shift in his adrenal receptors, not natural. The organism is producing a hormone analog. It's hijacking his stress response." Quentin stared at Bruk, his gut tightening. That's why he's been so reactive. He's not just anxious, he's being chemically pushed into overdrive. Echoes flicked through the data. "We've never seen anything like it. It's Threxian in origin, but likely mutated off-world. We suspect it came in with contaminated food stock." Bruk groaned, his massive frame twitching involuntarily. Quentin moved fast, stabilizing the thermal pad and whispering calming nonsense. The beast's ears flicked slightly, recognizing the tone if not the words. "I need a biopsy," Quentin said. "Deep tissue from the affected joint. If it's embedded in the muscle sheath, we won't get anything accurate from surface sampling." Echoes hesitated. "We'd need to immobilize the limb." "We're not restraining him again," Quentin replied. "He's compliant if he trusts you." "We could administer a localized nerve block," Murat offered, "but precision will be difficult without a scanner-assisted rig." "I'll do it manually." Quentin stood and cracked his neck. "I've done it on worse patients with fewer limbs and no sedation." A few minutes later, the equipment was wheeled in: sterile kit, biopsy needle, and the nerve block injector. Quentin washed up, gloved, and approached Bruk again. The beast didn't move, though his eyes tracked the tray. "All right, big guy," Quentin murmured. "This is gonna pinch, but we'll go slow." He pressed the injector just above the knee where the fur thinned, and felt the muscle jump beneath the skin. Bruk didn't flinch, but his breathing quickened. "Good," Quentin said softly. "That's the hard part." He palpated the joint carefully, finding the spot with the most heat and rigidity. The swelling had thickened, almost pulpy under the skin. He inserted the biopsy needle in a single controlled motion, angling for depth without scraping bone. Bruk tensed but stayed down. "Nearly there," he whispered, watching the gauge fill with the opaque yellowish fluid. "Got it." As he withdrew the needle, Bruk let out a low woof and settled again. Quentin patted his flank gently and stepped back, handing the sample to Echoes. "Priority analysis," he said. "Start with protein sequencing. If this organism's mimicking hormone signals, I want to know exactly how." "Understood," Echoes nodded, and departed with Murat. Quentin leaned against the enclosure wall and sat down, staring at the data overlay still hovering in his vision. The numbers weren't comforting. Bruk's immune function was tanking, and whatever was triggering the hyper-stress state wasn't letting go. Hours passed. The lab sent updates in bursts, protein sequences that didn't match any database, metabolic shifts in Bruk's liver, and a new signal pattern in his neural scans that suggested the parasite was beginning to affect cognition. At dusk cycle, Seska returned, carrying a tray with a sealed nutrient vial and a mug of something steaming. She set it down beside him and crossed her arms. "You've been here all day?" "Didn't notice," Quentin muttered, not looking up. "You're not going to like this," she said, "but the board's already drafting a containment protocol. They think it's transmissible." Quentin snorted. "It's not. I've been in physical contact for days. No fever, no abnormal vitals. It doesn't jump hosts easily. They'll override you if it escalates. You know that. I'm not letting them put him down." "No one said that yet." "They're thinking it." Seska sighed and sat beside him. "You've got less than a full cycle before the review. If you're going to turn this around, it has to happen soon." Quentin stood and rolled his shoulders. "Then we don't wait." He worked through the night. Bruk's hydration was slipping, so he inserted a slow-drip subdermal line with a stabilizing electrolyte mix. He adjusted the enclosure lighting to a low-spectrum comfort range and added environmental scent markers from Bruk's home biome, scraped from archived Threxian samples. The creature responded almost immediately, relaxing against the enclosure wall. By early next cycle, the lab returned with the sequencing results. Quentin scanned the report, eyes narrowing. "Found it," he said to himself. "This thing isn't just mimicking hormones, it's suppressing T response. That's why the infection keeps coming back." He compiled a makeshift antiviral cocktail, an aggressive combination of protein inhibitors and a metabolic disruptor typically used in reptilian species. The risk was high, it could trigger a seizure, maybe worse. But the alternative was watching Bruk spiral into septic shock. He prepared the compound carefully, calculating the dose to 1/10 of a microgram. As he stepped into the enclosure, Bruk raised his head, sluggish but alert. "I know," Quentin said, "but we've got one shot at this." He injected the antiviral blend into the subline and waited. 10 minutes passed. Bruk's breathing changed. Not worse, just different. Shallower, more measured. His eyes closed. The swelling in his joint didn't recede immediately, but his pulse stabilized. Quentin stared at the vitals, hardly daring to blink. Another hour, still stable. Quentin exhaled and sat down hard against the wall. "I think we're turning a corner, buddy." Bruk didn't answer. But he didn't growl, didn't twitch, and for the first time in 3 days he slept without flinching. Quentin dozed, cheek against the floor, when a buzz from his compad jolted him awake. It was echoes. "You need to see the scan." Quentin blinked himself upright and pulled the feed. The neural pattern had shifted again, this time toward baseline. The parasite was dying. He leaned back and laughed once, quietly, before rubbing his eyes. Outside the enclosure, Seska watched through the glass, arms still crossed. She tapped her comm. "Cancel the board meeting. He's doing it. The human's actually doing it." By the 4th day after the antiviral cocktail, Bruk was upright again, not pacing, not swaying, just standing under his own weight like a creature who remembered what balance used to feel like. The swelling in his joint had shrunk by 1/3, and the inflammation around his eyes had subsided. His coat, once dull and patchy from stress, was beginning to regain its sheen. Quentin stood outside the enclosure, arms crossed, watching the beast nudge aside a padded panel he dragged into a corner. It was the first time Bruk had interacted with his environment on his own since arrival. A soft chime from the corridor preceded the entrance of a new figure short, with a shell-like carapace and 6 narrow legs that tapped rapidly against the floor. Dr. Vin, a bioethologist from the outer colonies, clicked politely in greeting. "You're the one who stopped the euthanasia protocol," the creature said without preamble. "I'm the one who treated the cause instead of the symptoms," Quentin replied. "You're the ethologist?" "I was called in to determine if long-term containment was ethical." Vin tilted its domed head. "But I see you've already dismantled that question at the base." Quentin glanced over his shoulder. "He's only better because we listened. He wasn't hostile, he was in distress. Your species has an unusual threshold for proximity to danger." Quentin didn't answer that. He walked to the control panel and adjusted the environmental humidity by 2%. Bruk had started showing slight nasal discharge earlier, and Quentin suspected the dry air was irritating his mucosa. Vin watched the movement closely. "You've adjusted the enclosure 27 times since stabilization. That's an unusual level of micromanagement. I'm giving him back control. He can't leave, so the least I can do is make the space respond to him." Bruk grunted and lay down with a heavy thud, tongue lolling slightly as he stretched his neck. Quentin eyed the position. "That's new. He never relaxed like that before." "Would you consider him rehabilitated?" Vin asked. "No." Quentin moved to the side panel and loaded a protein supplement into the feeder. "He's not a project. He's a patient." Vin's mandibles clicked. "Interesting distinction." Quentin turned and leaned against the wall. "Look, I've worked with everything from Terran hyenas to the dueling wasps of Jorvan III. He's not unique in suffering. What's unique is that nobody before me thought he deserved recovery. Vin said nothing for a while. Then, after observing Bruk scratch his flank with a back paw, it spoke again. He'll need socialization eventually. Threxian Korr bonds are not optional. Solitary housing over time deteriorates neurological resilience. I know, Quentin looked away, but there aren't any others in captivity, and I'm not about to cram him in with something half his size and pray it goes well. Then what is your plan? I've been recording scents, vocalizations, movement patterns. If I can simulate another Korr well enough through sensory feedback, maybe he'll accept it as a placeholder. Vin paused. You're building him a fake friend? Not fake. Familiar. There's a difference. Later that day, Seska returned with a hard case under one arm and an expression Quentin hadn't seen before, cautiously impressed. You really did it, she said, setting the case down on a bench. I got authorization to lift the level 7 containment. He's no longer classed as a biohazard. He never was. She ignored that. I also brought something that might help with your simulation idea. Quentin opened the case. Inside were 2 cylindrical emitters and a scent dispersal module packed with sealed cartridges. Multisensory training rig, Seska explained, designed for high-threat fauna undergoing post-trauma conditioning. It's old, but it works. Quentin grinned. You're full of surprises. Don't get used to it. They installed the rig that evening. Quentin loaded it with the scent profile he'd been assembling, the mixture of pheromones, musk, and environmental dust he'd collected from the few archived Korr habitat samples available. He paired it with low-frequency vocalizations Bruk had made while resting, slowed and modulated to resemble a second beast. When the emitters activated, Bruk froze. His ears twitched, his head lifted. The sound played again. A low, warbling chuff, followed by a soft exhale. Bruk stood. He sniffed the air, then walked toward the emitter. Not fast, not aggressive, curious. He circled it, then sat beside it, pressing his flank against the nearest panel. Quentin watched the monitor, heart in his throat. Bruk closed his eyes. First contact, Quentin whispered. Over the next 4 days, they repeated the simulation in varying intervals. Bruk responded consistently, seeking the emitter, lying near it, vocalizing in return. On the 5th day, he began to groom himself immediately afterward, a behavior Vin confirmed was linked to emotional regulation in Threxian Korrs. Vin observed through the glass, mandibles twitching slightly. He believes the simulation is real. I don't care if he knows or not, Quentin said, as long as it gives him peace. The following week, a delegation arrived from the Threxian Planetary Council. 3 tall, bristle-maned officials, each bearing ceremonial armor and expressions that made Quentin feel like a bug under glass. They requested an audience with the human veterinary operative. Quentin met them in the observation room. You are the one who prevented the termination, the tallest said. We were told the specimen was unstable. He was sick, Quentin replied, and scared. He's neither now. You handled him without a neural suppressor. That is not standard. No, it's not. One of the others leaned closer. You did this without any formal training in our species? I read what was available. It wasn't much. The tallest crossed his arms. And you expect us to believe the creature is not a danger? He's not a creature. He has a name. Call him Bruk. A pause. Then the 3rd delegate, smallest of the 3, stepped forward. We monitored the simulation recordings, the vocal responses. He believes he's among kin. Quentin nodded. That's the idea. You reduced aggression through emotional resonance, through empathy. The tall one regarded him. We had planned to request repatriation, but seeing this, perhaps he would be better served here. Quentin's jaw tightened. He's not a case file. You don't get to send him back to isolation just because he's healthy now. We are not monsters. Then don't act like it. Silence hung between them. Eventually, the tallest Threxian raised a hand. We will leave him in your care, but there will be audits. I'll give you full access to his logs. Just don't undo what's been done. They nodded and left. That night, Quentin sat beside the enclosure again, sipping from a battered thermos. Bruk lay curled on the far side, eyes half closed, one paw resting near the inactive emitter. "You know," Quentin said, more to the air than anything, "you've officially caused more protocol rewrites than any patient I've ever had." Bruk grunted softly. Quentin smiled. "You earned your peace, big guy. Now let's keep it."